That's good. So let's look at that. Baruch Hashem. Okay, so somebody texted me a question today that relates to many areas of Hilchos Pesach. So we'll say it both in the Katan and then the Gadol in terms of areas. The question was, can I use a particular brand of baby formula on Pesach? So that particular brand of baby formula has Kitniyos in it. Now, the minhag of Ashkenazim is not to eat any products that contain Kitniyos inside of them. However, it's worth noting that for elderly people and for children that need to eat Kitniyos for their health, that is entirely permissible. One is allowed to eat Kitniyos. But aside from that question, it's worth considering the general question of Kitniyos and the question of minhagim, of customs in general. And this came up in a separate conversation with a number of my Talmidot this week, where they asked me a particular question. What exactly is this practice that the Jewish people do? So I said that's a minhag. That's not a halacha midaraisa. It's not a din midrabanan. That's a minhag. So one of them said, "Well, does that mean that we don't have to do it? It's a minhag, so that's optional. It's a custom. You don't have to do customs." That idea is very common and very false. And it's worth understanding exactly what a minhag is within this context. There are three primary sources of authority in terms of Jewish practices. We have what's called dinim de'araisa, biblical obligations. Mitzvahs de'araisa and isurim de'araisa. There are 613 mitzvahs in the Torah, last time I checked. Right? Exactly what makes up the 630 mitzvahs is an interesting discussion between the Rambam, the Ramban, the Sefer HaChinuch, the Baal Halachos. Okay, exactly what is counted in or out of the 630 mitzvahs. 248 positive mitzvahs, 365 negative mitzvahs. Within those mitzvahs, there are details, there are halachas midaraisa. Some of those things are definitions the Torah gives you that are deraisa. Specific details of the mitzvah, those are deraisa halachas within the mitzvah. And sometimes you'll have a mitzvah that is mitzvah deraisa. It's a biblical obligation, but with halachas midrabanan. So the Torah, for example, we'll give an example. The Torah says that you need to keep Shabbos. Shaman Shem Shabbos v'kacha. Midaraisa on a biblical level, the Torah tells us, this is Torah shebichsav, written Torah, and as explained by the Chachamim in the Torah Sheba'al Peh, that there are 39 primary kinds of work on Shabbos. Those are called the 39 malachas of Shabbos. Good. All of that is deraisa. If a person were to, light a fire on Shabbos, that would be a violation of one of the 613 mitzvahs, that mitzvah being observing Shabbos. That would be a biblical transgression of the mitzvah of observing Shabbos. Shaman Shem Shabbos L'Kacha includes don't do any of the 39 malachas. This is one of the 613 mitzvahs in the Torah. But then there are also dinim midrabanan. The Chachamim came along and said, okay, it's true. The Torah tells you, don't cook a kid in its mother's milk. What does that mean, says the Torah Sheba'al Peh? Moshe Rabbeinu came down from the mountain. They said to him, Rabbi Moshe, what does it mean? That just this whole thing about goats and milk and mothers, it's only, what about, cheeseburgers from cow? Moshe Rabbeinu is like, no. What that means is all meat, whether it comes from a goat or a sheep or you have goats, you have sheep, you have lamb, right? All of those three species, those are animals that you have domesticated in the Torah, that you milk, you use them both for milk, you have for meat. Those you cannot mix any of the milks of any of them with any, regardless of whether they are mothers and children. That's a halacha of, and it includes three halachas. There's a halacha of don't cook it, there's a halacha of don't eat it, and there's a halacha of don't benefit. Those are all dinim mid'oraisa. Those are biblical obligations, biblical prohibitions not to do any of those things. The Chachamim came along and realized at a certain point in time that people were treating chicken basically exactly the same as they treated meat, and therefore they made a gezer midrabanan. This is a rabbinic restriction on chicken and milk, of poultry and milk. That is called a din midrabanan. It's a din midrabanan. We treat it the same way that we treat the din deraisa, the same way that we treat the biblical law. It is a detail within the halacha of not cooking a kid in its mother's milk that the Chachamim came and said this thing. So you have the Torah, Hashem told us things on Har Sinai. Chachamim explained what those things are. Moshe Rabbeinu explained what those things are. Those are all biblical obligations. Then you have rabbinic obligations. Good. And then you have something called minhag. Minhag means a custom. Where does the custom come from? It doesn't come from the Torah, because Hashem didn't tell this to the Jewish people at Har Sinai. It didn't come from the oral tradition. It's not something that Moshe Rabbeinu explained within a detail of the Torah. And it did not come from the Chachamim saying, this is what you have to do. Otherwise, that would be a din midrabanan. What it came from was the Jewish people, primarily. A minhag is something that arises from within the Jewish people. This is the thing that we do. Who's we? Us. We, the people, right? We, the people, determine that this is a correct and appropriate thing to do. There are certain minhagim that the Jewish people as a whole have adopted, and then there are certain minhagim that only subsections of the Jewish people have adopted. Whatever the case may be, we are 100% bound by the customs, by the minhagim of our places, communities, people, and family. The best example that I can give, especially for Floridians, of what a minhag is an HOA, right? You have laws of the country, right? That's the deraisa, that's federal level. Then you have local laws, that's state level. And then you have your HOA. Your HOA says you can't paint your driveway purple. Why? It doesn't. The country didn't tell me. It's my right as a citizen. I can do whatever I want. Free speech, right? I can do what I can paint it. No, you can't. Not if you want to live here. Meaning, that's a minhag. Minhag means the thing that we have collectively agreed upon. Now, if you move into a neighborhood and they have an HOA, you are bound by the rules of that HOA. You can't say, I don't want that. You can't say, no, I didn't agree to it. How come I have to keep that? Of course you have to. If you live there, that's the minhag. Now, if everybody wants to get together and change the minhag, that's doable. It is possible for a community to get together and change a minhag. But that's only true if all of the people bound by that minhag are collectively agreeing to change that minhag. That can happen. So you have, for example, you could have a shul. This happened a number of years ago. The Wiener Stiebel in Brooklyn. It came from Vienna. They were davening Nusach Ashkenaz for years and years and years and years and years. That was the original minhag from Vienna. They davened Nusach Ashkenaz. It turned out that basically, as of 15 years ago, they realized there was 2 people in the shul that were still davening Nusach Ashkenaz, and everybody else was davening Nusach Sfard. So they collectively agreed to change the minhag of the shul. You can change the minhag, meaning you can collectively agree to change the minhag of an HOA, of a shul, of a community, so long as all of the interested parties are part of the decision. So an Ashkenazi is not allowed to decide not to observe Kitniyos. That's not your right. You don't have the right to do so. It doesn't exist, meaning it's not your minhag. It's all of our minhag, meaning all Ashkenazim have the minhag of Kitniyos. You can't just decide that you don't want to do that anymore. Or the Jewish people have adopted a minhag, at least according to the vast majority of the poskim, that men wear a yarmulke. That's a minhag. It's not a din midaraisa, it's not a din midraban, it's a minhag Yisrael. The Jewish people have collectively agreed that we wear yarmulkes. That's what we do. I don't want to wear a yarmulke. It's not your right. You don't get to decide to paint your driveway purple. You don't get to decide that this doesn't apply to me, that's optional for me. That's not true. A minhag means we collectively have decided something, and therefore we are collectively bound by it, both as a community and as individuals. And it is not the prerogative of an individual to decide that I don't want this anymore. Now, because of that, minhag is also halacha. And this is the lashon of the Chacham in many, many, many places, that minhag Yisrael Torah. That the minhag of the Jewish people is Torah as well. It's also Torah, meaning the collective custom of a community or of the Jewish people, certainly as a whole, is part and parcel of the Torah. And because of that, there are halachas that relate to minhagim. To a lot of people, that sounds like a strange thing. What do you mean a halacha about a minhag? Halacha is halacha minhag. No. There are rules of minhagim, the same way that there's rules of the HOA. And there's rules of how to change the laws of the HOA. There's laws on how to apply and how to change and how to amend and how to adapt. All of those things are true about minhagim as well. Which is why, when the Jewish people adopted the practice of, Ashkenazim adopted the practice of not eating Kitniyos, they adopted it with specific limitations. For example, if somebody's ill, or if you're talking about a baby, then Kitniyos is permissible. It's not that it's a loophole. That's what the HOA said. That's the minhag. The minhag is that if you are in this situation, the general rules of Kitniyos don't apply. And that's important to understand in terms of this minhag and in terms of all of the minhagim. And I point this out because there's two things that you need to be aware of. Thing number one is adopting a minhag is a very significant and serious thing in halacha. If you decide to take on a minhag, that's a real thing. It's not like, so from time to time we like to do X. No, if you're doing it, you have to do it. That's meaning you are adopting a practice. Which is why on Erev Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur Kol Nidre we talk about taking on exemplary practices without saying Bli Neder. If you want to start a minhag, you're welcome to, but you have to be very careful, cautious. What are you doing here? You are effectively signing yourself up for something, maybe signing your family up for something that maybe not everybody's entirely interested in doing. You don't have an obligation to adopt a minhag that you don't have, but if you do, that's a real thing. That's a real thing and it should be taken seriously. But also, the minhagim that your family has, whether it be, in Pesach everybody's got lots of minhagim. If your family doesn't eat gebracht, so then you are not entitled to choose to abandon that minhag. That's your minhag. If you don't eat, matzah balls on Pesach, if your family's minhag is to eat, round matzahs at the Seder and handmade matzahs at the Seder, you're not entitled to change that minhag. And if your family's minhag, like some yakas have the minhag of eating specifically machine-made square matzahs at the Seder, that's the minhag too. Meaning, all of these minhagim have basis. And you are not, you're not allowed just willy-nilly to choose, I don't like this anymore. And I'll say with one final caveat, and you see this in many of the Sfarim, there is something called a minhag shtus or a minhag tos. It is possible for a group of people to decide that they're all going to do something, and that thing was not intelligent. Meaning it didn't have a basis. It was like a ridiculous thing. People thought something, but they were wrong. So that's a minhag tos. You made a mistake. You weren't supposed to do that thing. Or a minhag shtus. You thought that a thing was a thing, but it really wasn't a thing. For example, there were certain communities that at some point in time didn't eat chicken on Pesach. They didn't eat chicken on Pesach. That was for a very good reason. The reason that they didn't eat chicken on Pesach was because all the chickens were fed grain. And when you shechted a chicken, there was always chametz in the stomach of the chicken. Certain places in Europe, they didn't eat chicken on Pesach because there was always chametz. There was always going to be chametz there. So there were people that are like, our custom is not to eat chicken. No, your custom is don't eat chametz on Pesach. It's got nothing to do with the chicken. Don't eat the chicken because there's chametz. But if there's no chametz, then there's nothing to talk about. That was a unique gather, a boundary for a particular period of time. It wasn't a general rule that people adopted. That was something specific. Or an NCSY camper at one point in time that came from a very, very weak background in Yiddishkeit. She came to us for her very first Shabbos meal, and everybody got up to wash in Tilas Yadayim, and she looked at my wife and she said, "Can I borrow a ring?" My wife said, "What do you need a ring for?" She's like, "To put in my mouth while I'm washing my hands." My wife was like, "What do you She's like, "I see all the girls, they take off the rings and they put it in their mouth while they're washing the Tilas Yadayim." Right? Such a thing is not a real minhag. There's no minhag to put a ring in your mouth while you're washing Tilas Yadayim. She had never seen the Tilas Yadayim before. So you can have people think like crazy things. They're like, but if you don't know, you don't know. That's called the minhag shtus, the minhag tos. There's no such minhag in the world to put a ring in your mouth while you're washing Tilas Yadayim. So you have to figure out if the minhag is real. But if the minhag is real, if it comes from a appropriate practice in halacha and in community, then abandoning that minhag is not something that everybody is entitled to. To be continued tomorrow.